She had a plan, and the plan required her to look like someone who needed the work. Maren Sutcliffe stood before the narrow mirror in the coaching inn at Aldenvale and studied herself with the cold precision of a woman who had spent the last 3 weeks learning to see herself as others would. The gown was borrowed, gray wool, slightly too wide at the shoulders, with a mended tear at the left cuff that she had not bothered to hide. She had unpinned her hair and redone it lower, closer to the neck, the way the housemaids at Caro had worn theirs when she was a child watching from the upstairs landing. She looked tired. She looked uncertain. She looked, in other words, precisely like a woman applying for a position as a lady's companion at Ashburton Park. She looked nothing like the daughter of the man who had built half of it. That was the idea. The solicitor had been very clear when she came to see him in London 3 weeks prior. Mr. Edgecombe was a small man with careful hands who had managed the Sutcliffe estate accounts for 11 years, and when he spread the papers across his desk and explained what her uncle had done, he did not meet her eyes. "The entailment was contested," he said. "Your father's will left Ashburton Park to you outright, but your uncle produced documentation suggesting the original deed carried conditions your father was not aware of." "That is not possible," Maren said. "No," Mr. Edgecombe agreed quietly. "It is not, but it has been accepted by the court, at least provisionally, and until the matter is resolved, which could take 8 to 14 months, the estate is under the stewardship of Lord Caswell." Lord Caswell. She had never met him. He was a duke of some northern county, a man who had apparently done her uncle some favor at the right moment and received the stewardship of a house he had never seen as his reward. Her uncle's handwriting was on the letter of appointment. Her uncle, who had attended her father's funeral and wept loudly at the graveside and eaten 3 portions of the cold ham at the reception after. "I need to be there," Maren said. Mr. Edgecombe looked up. "I beg your pardon. The documents are somewhere in that house. My father kept everything. Letters, deeds, correspondence going back 40 years. If the original deed exists, the real one, it is at Ashburton Park. Miss Sutcliffe, you cannot simply—" "I'm not asking your permission," she said, not unkindly. "I am informing you of what I intend to do." She had written to Ashburton Park the following morning, applying for the position of lady's companion that had been advertised in the Times, a position she had noticed because it described, with some exactness, the kind of woman she could become if she unpinned her hair and borrowed a gray dress. She signed the letter with her middle name and her mother's maiden name. She was Miss Evelyn Hark. She was 26 years old and came with a reference from a Mrs. Colton of Bath, who was, in fact, her former piano teacher, and who had agreed to the deception with an enthusiasm that suggested she found the entire thing rather thrilling. The reply had come in 5 days. She was expected on the 14th. The coach deposited her at the bottom of the long drive just after noon. She had not been to Ashburton Park in 4 years, since before her father's illness, when she had come for Christmas and the house had smelled of pine and the fires in the great hall had burned so high the heat reached the back of the room. She had stood on the steps of this same drive and watched her father laugh at something one of the gamekeepers said. She remembered the particular quality of his laugh, the way it came up from somewhere deep, unhurried. She did not let herself think about that now. The housekeeper who met her at the servants' entrance was a woman named Mrs. Fallow, compact and gray-haired, with the particular expression of a person who has managed difficult households long enough to expect difficulty as the natural condition of things. She looked Maren over once, from the top of her sensibly pinned hair to the toes of her half-boots, and seemed to find her satisfactory in a minimal sense. "You'll be the companion," Mrs. Fallow said. It was not a question. "Yes, Miss Hark." "His Grace does not keep a great deal of company at present. Her ladyship, the dowager, is in the east wing. You'll attend her in the mornings, read to her in the afternoons. She has her preferences, and she'll make them known. Of course. His Grace is in residence through the month. Mrs. Fallow paused here, and something crossed her face that Maren could not quite read. He keeps to himself. He is not difficult, precisely, but he is particular. You'll stay out of his way, and there'll be no trouble. Maren nodded, which was the correct response. She followed Mrs. Fallow through the servants' corridor and tried not to look at anything too long. The wallpaper in the back passage was the same faded stripe it had always been. There was a brass hook near the kitchen door, where her father had hung his riding coat on winter mornings. She had counted the hooks once as a child bored on a rainy afternoon because she had been told to stay out from underfoot, and the back passage had seemed like a place no one would think to look for her. 7 hooks. She did not look at them. She was shown to a room on the upper floor of the east wing, small and decent, with a window that looked out over the south garden. The south garden had been her mother's project, a long bed of lavender and white roses that had gone slightly wild in the years since. Someone had trimmed it back, but the shape was still there. The curving path, the stone bench at the center where her mother had liked to sit with her coffee on summer mornings. Maren set her case on the narrow bed and pressed her hands together and breathed. She was here. She would find the documents. She would be gone before anyone was the wiser. That was the plan. The next morning, Mrs. Fallow came to her room at 7 with a pair of riding boots. They were a man's boots, dark leather, caked along the sides with dried mud from what looked like at least 2 separate outings. They were deposited on Maren's threshold with the brisk efficiency of someone delivering post. His Grace would like these ready for 11, Mrs. Fallow said. Maren looked at the boots, then she looked at Mrs. Fallow. I'm the lady's companion, she said. Yes. Mrs. Fallow's expression did not change, and the boot boy has a fever. His Grace's valet is occupied with the carriage harness, and I am short-staffed in 3 separate directions before 9 in the morning. If you'd like to make a point of principle, Miss Hark, I suggest you save it for a household where there is someone available to listen to it. She left. The boots remained. Maren stared at them for a long moment. She thought, with a very specific quality of calm that she recognized from the harder moments of her life, about what her father would have said. He had been a practical man, her father. He had believed in getting on with things. She carried the boots to the small room off the kitchen where such matters were attended to, found the blacking and the brush, and set to work. She was halfway through the left boot when the door opened. She knew, without looking up, that it was not Mrs. Fallow. The quality of the silence that preceded the entrance was different, heavier somehow, with more space in it. "Those are mine," said a voice. She looked up. Lord Caswell, the Duke of Ravenscroft, as his full title apparently ran, was not what she had assembled in her imagination. She had pictured her uncle's ally as some version of her uncle. Soft around the middle, self-satisfied, accustomed to rooms arranged for his convenience. The man standing in the doorway was none of those things. He was perhaps 30, with a lean face and dark eyes that moved quickly and missed, she suspected, very little. He was dressed for riding and had clearly not expected to find anyone in this room. "Yes, Your Grace," she said, and returned her attention to the boot. There was a pause. "You're the companion," he said. "Yes, Your Grace." "Mrs. Fallow put you to work on my boots." She did. Another pause, longer this time. She could feel him looking at her with the focused attention of someone trying to work out a problem. She kept her expression neutral and her hands occupied. "I apologize," he said. "That was not an appropriate task." She looked up again, because that was unexpected. His face held something that looked, under close examination, like genuine discomfort. Not the practiced regret of a man accustomed to smoothing over inconveniences, but the particular expression of a person who has noticed something is wrong and is not sure what to do about it. "It is no trouble," she said. Your Grace. He left. She finished the boots and brought them to the valet and said nothing about any of it. The Dowager Duchess, his grandmother, as she discovered, was a small woman of approximately 70 who had been in the East Wing of Ashfordton Park for the past 6 weeks and appeared to have settled into it as her natural territory. Her name was Lady Edith, and she had opinions about everything, expressed them often, and showed no particular interest in whether they were welcome. She was, despite all of this, the most honest person Maren had spoken to in recent memory. "You're very composed," Lady Edith said on their second morning, while Maren read to her from a novel the lady had already read twice and corrected the plot of at least 4 times. "Thank you," Maren said. It wasn't a compliment, precisely. Composed women in service positions are either managing a great deal of unhappiness or hiding something. "Which is it with you?" Maren turned a page. "I find the work agreeable, my lady." Lady Edith looked at her with eyes that had gone slightly filthily with age, but still held a quality that Maren associated with people who have watched human behavior long enough to stop being surprised by it. "You have the hands of a woman who did not grow up working." Maren did not answer. "My grandson is watching you," Lady Edith said after a moment, as if they had been discussing this all along. "He does that when something puzzles him. He has always been methodical about puzzles." "I have done nothing to invite curiosity," Maren said carefully. "No," the old woman agreed. "That's rather what makes you curious." She had been at Ashfordton Park for 11 days when she found her father's study locked. This was not entirely surprising. She had expected changes, had expected things to have been reorganized or displaced in the 4 years since his death. What she had not expected was that the room would be sealed with a new lock, the kind that required a specific key and had not been there when her father was alive. She stood in front of the door and thought about what that meant. Someone had locked it deliberately. Someone who knew or suspected that what was inside mattered. She went back to her room and stood at the window and looked at the south garden and did not sleep well that night. The Duke of Ravenscroft. She could not think of him simply as Lord Caswell, which felt imprecise. He was the kind of man who occupied his full title, had a habit of riding in the early morning and returning through the east wing rather than the main entrance, which meant that she saw him more often than she ought to, given that she was meant to stay out of his way. He did not seem to seek these encounters. He also did not seem particularly inclined to avoid them. He had asked her, one morning, what she was reading. She had told him. He had looked at the book with an expression that suggested he found her choice unexpected, and then said nothing else, and continued down the corridor, which she found, privately, rather more interesting than if he had said something. He had retrieved her umbrella on a wet afternoon when she was crossing from the east garden, and the wind had turned it inside out. He had not commented on the incident. He had simply handed it back to her, right way out, and kept walking. On the evening of the 14th day, she found the study unlocked. She did not question this. She went in. The room was mostly as she remembered it. Her father's desk at the center, the bookshelves along the east wall, the landscape painting above the fireplace that she had been told as a child was worth a great deal, but that she had always thought looked sad. The papers on the desk had been sorted and some removed, but the shelves were intact, and the locked drawer in the lower right side of the desk opened with the small key she had kept on her person for 4 years, without knowing exactly why, only knowing that her father had pressed it into her hand the last Christmas she had spent here and said, "Keep this somewhere safe," with the particular emphasis of a man making sure he is heard. Inside the drawer, a sealed envelope, her name on the front, not Evelyn Hark, Maren. Her hands, she noticed distantly, were not entirely steady. She sat down in her father's chair and opened the envelope. The letter was dated 3 months before his death. Her father's handwriting which she would have known anywhere. The long, slightly leftward-leaning hand of a man who had been told as a boy to correct it, and had never entirely bothered. It told her, in the careful language of a man who has had time to think about what he needs to say, that he had known his brother's intentions, that he had made arrangements, that the original deed to Ashfordton Park, the one predating the entailment, the one that superseded her uncle's claim, had been placed with a secondary solicitor in Aldenvale, a Mr. Burwell of Church Street, with instructions to produce it if his daughter ever came asking. He had left the key for her to find. He had known she would come. She sat with that for a long moment. Then she heard footsteps in the corridor outside, and the quality of them. Deliberate, unhurried, not Mrs. Fallow's brisk efficiency, but something more measured, told her who it was before the door opened. The Duke of Ravenscroft stood in the doorway of what was, as of this moment, no longer a study to which she had unauthorized access, but the room where he had clearly been headed. He took in the scene, the open drawer, the letter in her hands, the fact that she was sitting behind the desks as if she had always belonged there. "Miss Hark," he said. She looked at him. She was very tired suddenly of that name. "That is not in fact my name," she said. "Your Grace." The silence that followed was the particular kind that occurs when two people are recalibrating simultaneously. He came into the room and closed the door, not quickly, but with the decisiveness of a man who has decided to hear something out. He sat in the chair across the desk, the visitor's chair, she noticed, as if the relative positions of the thing were as clear to him as they were to her, and looked at her with the focused, unreadable attention she had come to associate with him. "Who are you?" he said. So she told him. She told him about Mr. Edgecombe and the contested will. She told him about her uncle's documentation and the court's provisional ruling. She told him about the advertisement Times and the gray borrowed dress and the coaching inn mirror. She told him about the key her father had given her, and the letter she was holding, and the solicitor on Church Street in Aldenvale who was in possession of the document that would end this. She did not cry. She had cried for her father privately and thoroughly in the early months, and she had decided since then that what remained to be done required something steadier than grief. When she finished, the Duke of Ravenscroft was quiet for a moment. "Your uncle told me the estate was uncomplicated," he said. "My uncle," Maren said, "is not a truthful man." Something moved across his face, not quite anger, but the particular expression of a person realizing they have been made an instrument of someone else's purpose without their knowledge or consent. She recognized it because she had worn it herself 3 weeks ago in a solicitor's office in London. "The lock on the study," she said. "Was that you?" "Yes." He met her eyes. "I found it had been gone through. I didn't know by whom. I thought until recently that the relevant papers had already been removed. By my uncle. That is the conclusion I was drawing." He paused. "I was in the process of attempting to determine the correct course of action." She looked at him. "Were you?" "Yes." It was said without defensiveness, which was, she thought, either the sign of a very honest man or a very good liar. She had met enough of both to know that the difference usually revealed itself in the details. "I did not take this stewardship to dispossess someone of their home," he said. "I took it because I was given to understand it was a legal formality in a resolved matter. I had reason to trust the man who told me so. I no longer have that reason." Maren set her father's letter on the desk. "Mr. Burwell of Church Street," she said. "I intend to call on him tomorrow morning." "I'll come with you," the Duke said. She looked at him. "You'll need a witness of some standing," he said. "When the document is presented to the court, your uncle will contest it. He'll contest anything." His voice was even, practical. "I am, whatever else can be said of the situation, currently the steward of this estate. That carries weight." She thought about it. She thought about the boots she had polished on her first morning, and the umbrella turned inside out in the rain, and the chair he had chosen just now when he came into the room. She thought about her father's letter, which had asked her to be brave and careful, and to remember that the house would wait for her. "All right," she said. They rode to Aldenvale the following morning. Mr. Burwell of Church Street was an elderly man of great stillness who had apparently been waiting for this specific visit for approximately 2 years, and received them with the quiet satisfaction of a person who has held something in trust for a very long time and is finally able to hand it over. He produced the document from a locked strongbox. He produced, additionally, a witnessed and notarized letter from Maren's father attesting to its authenticity and the circumstances of its deposit. He handed these things to Maren directly, which she noticed, and which she thought the Duke noticed as well. She read the deed on the drive back. Ashfordton Park and all appurtenant lands to Maren Eliza Sutcliffe, sole surviving child of Robert Ashfordton Sutcliffe, in full and absolute ownership without condition. Her father's signature, witnessed and stamped, dated 15 years before her uncle had ever thought to contest a thing. She looked out the window at the countryside going past, and felt for the first time since Mr. Edgecombe had spread those papers across his desk in London that something had come undone in her chest in a way that was not entirely unwelcome. "Are you all right?" the Duke said. She turned. He was watching her with the same focused attention he'd been directing at her for the past 2 weeks, but there was something different in it now, less like a puzzle being examined and more like a person being seen. "I will be," she said. It took 6 weeks and 2 court hearings, and one very unpleasant morning, during which her uncle said a number of things that Maren stood through without expression, and the Duke of Ravenscroft said very little, but positioned himself in a way that made it clear that any further unpleasantness would be met with consequences of a legal and social nature that her uncle would not enjoy. At the conclusion of the second hearing, the judge affirmed the deed. Ashfordton Park was hers. She was standing on the front steps when she heard the door behind her open. She had come out alone, wanting a moment, and the afternoon light on the south garden was the particular gold of late autumn, the lavender gone now, but the white roses still holding a few late blooms. "The judgment has been filed," the Duke said, coming to stand beside her. He did not have his coat. He had clearly come directly from the solicitor's table inside. "You'll receive the formal paperwork within the week." "Thank you," she said. For a moment she could not manage more than that. He was quiet beside her, looking out at the garden. He had a capacity for silence that she had come to appreciate, the kind that did not press on a person but simply occupied its own space. "What happens now?" he said finally. She had thought about this. She had been thinking about it since that evening in her father's study, and she thought she had an answer that was honest, which seemed to her at this point to be the only kind worth offering. "I stay," she said, "and I suspect you are welcome here as long as you would like to be, if you can bear the company of someone who polished your boots under false pretenses." Something shifted in his face. It was not quite a smile. He was not, she had observed, a man who smiled easily or often, but it was close to one, and in someone less restrained it might have reached his eyes. "I think," he said, "that the boots were very well done." She laughed. It was the first time she had laughed since she had come here, and it surprised her, the ease of it, the way it belonged to a version of herself that had been waiting quietly beneath the gray dress and the borrowed name and the careful years of managing things that should not have needed to be managed. The garden was hers, the house was hers, the late roses were hers. And the man standing beside her in his shirt sleeves in the autumn afternoon, watching her with the particular attention of someone who had decided to stay, who was, she thought, in all the ways that counted, beginning to be hers as well.